Okay, let's try something. If you, right now, had to give just one single definition of who you are, like boil down the essence of you into one clear statement, what comes up?
It's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, for most of us, I think that attempt doesn't really land on a solid, fixed thing. It's more like when you look inside, you see, I don't know, a whole collection of different versions.
Sometimes contradictory versions, even competing ones.
Exactly. And it can leave you feeling kind of scattered, maybe fragmented, maybe just unsettled.
That feeling, that sense of being fractured inside, it's incredibly common. And, the standard advice we always get is find the pieces, glue them back together.
Right. Integrate yourself, fix what's broken, that whole narrative.
Precisely. But today, we want to explore something pretty different, a perspective shift that comes from Gestalt thinking.
So this deep dive isn't really about repairing broken parts. It's more about shifting the actual lens you use to see your inner world.
That's the core idea, moving away from seeing yourself as this, puzzle you have to assemble.
And more towards understanding identity as something dynamic, a field of perception that organizes itself.
Exactly. It's about starting to perceive the wholeness that's actually already there, but maybe it's obscured by how we try to manage ourselves,
And this comes from Gestalt psychology, which I remember wasn't originally just therapy, right? It started as a theory about how we see things.
That's right. Before it was therapy, it was this really elegant theory of perception, how the mind naturally organizes reality into patterns. We don't see chaos. We see structure. We see figures emerging from a background, the ground.
Okay, so if our minds are wired to see wholes, to organize things, why is it that when the figure we're trying to see is ourselves, we so often end up feeling the opposite, fragmented instead of clear?
That's the central tension, isn't it? What happens when the self figure just doesn't emerge coherently? That's exactly the space we need to explore.
So let's dig into that feeling of fragmentation first. When you try to look at your whole self, it's not like seeing a single painting. It feels more like looking into a shattered mirror, maybe, reflecting different pieces.
Yes, distinct pieces, shards. And these aren't just abstract ideas, are they? They're specific versions of you that show up.
Like, okay, think about the professional self. That version can be really polished, right? Decisive, functional, handles stress, meets the deadlines, kind of armored up.
Definitely armored. It's a real and necessary part of you, absolutely functional in certain contexts.
And this feels key. While that polished self is real, it's also incomplete. It's optimized for just one situation.
Exactly. If you try and make that the only definition of who you are, the whole thing starts to feel wrong, fragmented.
Because there are other shards right alongside it.
Like maybe that raw, trembling inner child part. The bit that still kind of flinches if someone raises their voice unexpectedly.
Or the part that feels excited about something but immediately shuts it down, like, oh, better not get too happy.
Yeah, maybe because somewhere, way back, it learned that big feelings weren't safe or wouldn't last. That version didn't disappear. It's just buried under layers of competence and responsibility, all the shoulds.
And then there's maybe that ghost shard.
Yeah.
The one that pops up late at night, 3 a.m., when everything's quiet.
Asking those big questions. Who am I really under all this? What's the point if nobody's watching?
Yeah.
So what's really crucial here for our deep dive is to see this not just as poetry, but as a perceptual thing. Gestalt says we organize what we see into a main figure against a background, the ground.
So when we try to see our identity, the self is the figure we're trying to perceive.
Right. And the ground. That's the whole context of your inner world, your history, your fears right now, feelings you've pushed down, all those competing versions we just talked about.
And the fragmentation happens when that background, the ground, is just too messy. Too full.
Exactly. Too cluttered, too contradictory. If the ground is overloaded with, say, unresolved grief, or maybe anger you weren't allowed to show, or even just intense pressure to be perfect,
then no single clear self-figure can really stand out cleanly.
Precisely. The mind wants coherence. It's always trying to organize, but it can't make one single figure emerge from that noise. So what does it do? It presents the material it can see clearly in sections, fragments.
So the fragmentation isn't a sign that something's broken, necessarily. It's the mind's natural response to an overloaded internal context, like visual static on a TV.
That's a great way to put it. It's the visual static of an oversubscribed channel. It's an outcome of perception under certain conditions.
Okay, that leads us somewhere really important, I think. because the usual story we get told is totally different.
Totally different.
Society, self-help, whatever.
Mm.
It usually says you're scattered, you need to integrate, glue yourself back together. The ascension is always damage.
Right, that you're fundamentally broken. And that assumption, honestly, it's so costly. Because if you believe you're broken, how do you approach yourself?
With suspicion, like something's wrong with you that needs fixing.
Exactly. You use tools for repair, maybe force, criticism, trying to suppress the parts you think are damaged.
But the Gestalt idea offers something else.
It offers huge relief just by changing the words. The core shift is this simple. You are not broken, you are unfinished.
Okay, broken versus unfinished. That feels different. Unfinished implies potential. Something still unfolding.
Yes, an arc that hasn't resolved yet. And what does something unfinished need? Not repair, not force. It needs attention. It needs allowing.
That immediately changes the feeling, doesn't it? It shifts from self-criticism, why am I like this, why can't I fix it, towards maybe curiosity. Okay, what's this part of me trying to do? What's waiting to complete here?
Think about the difference in how you'd react. Under the broken model, when that raw, shaky child part shows up, you see it as a failure. Oh no, I haven't integrated properly, and you try to push it down again.
Which just creates more tension, more rigidity.
Right. But from the unfinished perspective, you see that raw part not as damage, but as like a necessary note in the music, a note that just hasn't found its place in the melody yet.
Let's use that melody analogy. It's like when you have a song stuck in your head, but only half of it.
Mm-hmm. That half-hummed tune, it just loops, right? It kind of pulls at you. You can almost feel the next note, but it's just hanging there, unresolved, creates a real tension.
But the tune isn't really no wrong, it's just
Yeah.
incomplete.
Exactly. So apply that to identity. Those different versions, the professional, the dreamer, the cynic, the tired parent, they aren't fragments to be thrown away. They're all necessary notes in the composition of you.
The problem isn't having too many notes.
No, the problem is maybe trying to listen to them one at a time. Or worse, trying to silence the ones you don't like.
So it's like we're not a solo instrument, we're more like an orchestra.
I like that, an orchestra.
And the feeling of fragmentation is just the sound of, I don't know, the violins playing one thing while the trumpets play something completely different.
Yeah.
Because the conductors are maybe asleep.
Or the conductor, our awareness is actively trying to shush the woodwinds because, well, their tune is a bit uncomfortable or inconvenient right now.
Huh. Right, so the fragmentation we feel is the result of forcing these parts into isolation.
Yes. If the professional note tries to be the only sound, the tired note and the dreamer note are going to create dissonance. They'll create internal friction, maybe even sabotage things until they get heard.
So the melody, the coherent self, it's actually already there, potentially.
It's there, but we have to stop trying to conduct so hard, stop trying to force it, and just listen. Listen for the resolution that the parts themselves are seeking.
Okay, so if wholeness isn't something we build or assemble, but it's more about how we perceive. It reminds me of those optical illusions, you know, the one where you can see a vase or you can see two faces looking at each other.
Ah, the figure ground illusion. Perfect example.
You can only really see one at a time, right? But both are actually there in the image. The image itself doesn't change, only what you focus on, your perception.
That's the core insight here. Wholeness isn't a static state you achieve and then hold on to forever. It's a constant, dynamic, perceptual field. Your identity isn't a solid statue, it's more like a flowing stream, shifting based on where your attention goes and what the context requires.
Which explains why who you are can feel like it changes completely sometimes, depending on where you are or who you're with.
Absolutely. The professional you isn't fake. It's the figure that naturally emerges when the situation, the field, calls for competence.
And the wounded you might surface when the context feels unsafe, or maybe when vulnerability is needed.
Right. They're all real figures emerging from the total ground of your being. They are, in a sense, appropriate responses to the context as you perceive it.
So why do we feel fragmented then, if this is all natural emergence?
Because we interfere constantly. We fall into what you could call the fragmentation trap when we latch onto one figure, often the one that gets the most approval, right? And we say, okay, this is the real me. And then when another figure naturally arises, maybe anger, maybe deep sadness, maybe confusion, we panic. We think, wait, this isn't me, this shouldn't be here, this must be wrong or broken, and we try to suppress it, push it away.
Is that panic maybe connected to this idea that we have to be consistent?
Yeah.
That integrity means always being the same. If I was confident yesterday, I can't possibly feel uncertain today.
Yes, exactly. We tend to moralize consistency. We think it's a virtue. But Gestalt suggests something different. Maybe true integrity is actually the capacity to hold contradiction, to allow different, even opposing figures to coexist within the same field of awareness.
Okay, so the key is non-interference.
Non-interference, that's paramount. Perception is inherently a self-organizing system. It naturally seeks closure, completion, wholeness, unless we interrupt the flow.
How do we interrupt it? Like, what does that actually look like day to day?
Oh, we do it all the time. Mostly by judging, by suppressing, by exiling certain figures.
So when I tell myself my organized, productive self is good and my restless, daydreaming self is bad or a distraction?
You've just interfered. You've fractured the field. When you praise the calm, mature professional, and you actively dislike or even hate the demanding, needy part of yourself, you've interfered.
That judgment, that moralizing, that's the action that breaks the natural flow.
Yes, because it refuses to allow a figure its natural right to exist and express itself. You stop the flow by setting up rules about which kinds of figures are allowed to emerge from the ground and which ones must be kept hidden.
Let's bring this to something concrete, like performance. We all perform to some extent, right? Think about being at a dinner party. Maybe you're really uncharming, witty, engaging. That's the social self figure taking center stage.
And it's functional, often necessary in that context.
But then the common way to think about it is, if you're performing, it wasn't the real you, it was fake.
Right. And the proof seems to be what happens afterwards. You get home, close the door, and just collapse. Exhausted. Maybe irritable.
And we think, see? That proves the party me was fake. This tired, grumpy me is the real one.
But using the Gestalt lens, we see it differently. The performance was real and functional for that context. The exhaustion isn't proof of fakeness, it's the cost of the fragmentation.
Ah, okay. Say more about that cost.
The exhaustion comes from the immense energy it took to actively suppress all the other figures while you were at the party. The quiet part, the tired part, the part that just wanted to reflect. You forced them into silence so the social self could dominate.
So the fragmentation isn't the performance itself, but the refusal to acknowledge that all those other versions existed simultaneously and also had needs.
Precisely. You drain the battery of your whole system by forcing only one figure to run the show and consume all the available energy.
This makes me think about shame too, especially around things like social media.
Yeah.
You know, posting the curated, smiling, everything's great version of life. We often judge that as inauthentic.
And yet that curated self is often not truly fake at all. It's frequently a powerful protective figure. Yes, emerging from a really primal need for safety. Think about it. If you grew up or even just exist now in environments where showing vulnerability, making mistakes, or expressing real sadness was somehow punished or rejected.
You learn pretty fast that being real can be risky.
Exactly. So that protective figure, the I'm fine mask, is actually highly functional. It's doing its job, shielding you from perceived danger or judgment.
And the shame we feel about it comes from
What?
judging that protector.
It comes precisely from the moralizing, from calling that protective figure fake or inauthentic, and from having exiled the vulnerable part it's trying desperately to protect. When you hate the protector, you create this internal war.
And that internal war maybe feeds that 3 a.m. ghost shard, the whisper of self-judgment.
Absolutely. We turn these natural, flowing, sometimes contradictory parts of ourselves into these warring factions just by labeling them good or bad, real or fake. When you call a protective mask guilty, you're just adding more clutter, more moral baggage to the ground.
Gestalt says the whole is other than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, right. Yes. And when we bury figures, not because they're actually harmful, but just because they're inconvenient to the image we want to project, we essentially turn our inner ground into, well, a kind of graveyard. A graveyard of suppressed energies, unlived expressions.
Then those buried energies, they don't just go away.
No, those uncompleted gestalts, they linger, they haunt the field, and they inevitably distort how we perceive things now. So if the ground is potentially this graveyard of suppressed energies, we need to understand how they get buried. How does fragmentation really start? It's not always about one big trauma. Often it begins with fixation.
Fixation, like getting stuck.
Getting stuck, yes. Refusing to let perception flow naturally. And interruption. This is how unfinished gestalts are born.
Okay, so an unfinished gestalt is like natural impulse, an emotion, an action, something that tried to emerge.
But it got cut off, suppressed, judged, interrupted somehow before it could run its natural course, before it could complete its arc.
Like stopping a movie right before the climax and just leaving that tension hanging in the air.
Exactly that. Imagine a moment where you needed to genuinely grieve, let tears flow, or a sudden impulse for some wild creative expression, or maybe a moment of healthy anger, setting a boundary.
Okay.
Now, if that emerging figure is met immediately with judgment, internal or external, like, don't be silly, that's selfish, pull yourself together, good girls don't get angry.
The natural completion is blocked.
It's sad.
Severed.
Right. And the energy of that impulse, it doesn't just vanish, it gets stuck. It lingers in the system as unresolved perceptual tension.
And the mind hates unresolved things.
Right.
Based on Gestalt principles.
Yeah.
It wants completion.
Fundamentally, it abhors unresolved patterns. So these lingering tensions, these unfinished gestalts, they kind of vibrate in the background, constantly demanding attention, seeking a way to complete.
And the body holds this tension too.
The nervous system absolutely holds that tension physically, and the perceptual field holds it, well, perceptually. Because the drive for closure is so strong, the mind will actually start to distort incoming information. It will unconsciously scan the environment for situations that vaguely resemble the original interrupted one, creating opportunities where the old figure might finally get to finish its business.
Ah, so this is where triggers come in.
This is exactly triggers. The unresolved figure hijacks a brand new situation, projecting its old story onto something completely unrelated, turning a minor disagreement at work maybe into a 5-alarm emotional fire.
Okay, let's use that classic example. A child experiences a loss, maybe starts to cry, and is told repeatedly, don't cry, be strong. Crying is for babies.
So the figure of the grieving child needing release is interrupted, judged, exiled to that inner graveyard.
Years pass. That child is now an adult, maybe in a professional setting, a meeting. A colleague offers some criticism on a work proposal. Logically, okay, it's just feedback.
Right, just data exchange in a business context.
Right.
But what happens internally for that adult?
Suddenly, maybe this huge wave of physical tension. A knot in the stomach. Maybe feeling intense shame, like they want to disappear. Maybe even fighting back peers.
Exactly. The current situation, the professional disagreement, wasn't really the trigger in itself. It was just the stimulus that provided the closest structural match for the nervous system to try and finally resolve that ancient, interrupted gestalt of the grieving child.
So the system is essentially saying, okay, here's a chance, let's finish this now.
Yes. The perceptual echo isn't really my proposal has a flaw. It's something much older and deeper, like if I show imperfection, crying, grieving, not being strong, I will be rejected. I'll be unsafe.
Wow. So the grieving child figure is trying to emerge completely out of context in that meeting because the whole field is still fixated on that original interruption.
That's the definition of perceptual hijacking. The deep need for completion becomes so powerful it overrides present moment reality. The problem is never the figure itself, the grief, the anger, whatever it is. The problem is the frozen, inhibited ground that won't let it complete. So given this hijacking, this disruption from unfinished business, how do we clear that ground? How do we let the natural self-organizing process start up again?
Yeah, what's the way out?
Well, the key insight here is actually radical in how simple it sounds. Attention completes gestalts.
Okay, but hang on, attention. Isn't that a bit passive? We're talking about really old, deep, sometimes painful patterns. If I just pay attention to my rage or my shame, does that really fix the problem? Doesn't it just mean I'm thinking about it more, maybe even getting stuck in it?
That's a really crucial question, because we have to be very clear about what kind of attention we mean. There are different kinds.
Okay.
The kind of attention that often causes more problems is what we could call intellectual attention. That's the mind jumping in immediately to name it, label it, analyze it, figure out why it's there, connect it to the past, strategize how to fix it.
Which sounds like what we usually do.
It is, but notice that's still interference. It's still the mind trying to manage and control the experience, often based on judgment. This feeling is bad, how do I get rid of it?
So what's the other kind? The attention that actually helps.
The healing attention is different. We could call it phenomenological attention, or maybe just pure, non-judgmental, allowing attention.
Okay, what does that look like in practice?
It's the capacity to simply notice the figure when it arises that wave of anxiety, the heat of anger, the heaviness of shame, and let it occupy the figure's space in your awareness without immediately telling a story about it.
So not analyzing, just noticing its qualities.
Exactly, noticing where you feel it in your body. Is it hot, cold, tense, vibrating? Does it have a shape, a texture? You're observing the raw phenomenon of it without adding the layer of moral judgment or interpretation.
But our instinct, usually when something uncomfortable like anxiety comes up, is make it go away, push it down, distract ourselves.
And that pushing is the continuation of the original interruption, see? It reinforces the fixation, keeps the gestalt unfinished. So the practice here when an uncomfortable figure emerges isn't to fix it or force it out. It's simply to notice it, allow it to be there. They're not demanding it stays, but you're also not fighting it or demanding it leave. You just create a kind of spacious container for it.
And the idea is that by being fully witnessed, without interference, the figure gets to would complete its natural arc.
Yes. It gets to finally do whatever it needed to do, maybe crest like a wave, maybe reveal its underlying message, maybe just dissipate. It completes its cycle naturally, not because you willed it away, but because its need, perhaps simply the need to be seen, to be acknowledged, was finally met.
And when it recedes naturally,
it leaves something incredibly valuable behind. Clear ground, space. A field that's now less cluttered, more available for whatever new figures need to emerge in the present moment.
So this means that real insight, in the Gestalt sense, isn't necessarily an aha moment of intellectual understanding.
Not primarily. It's more often a sudden structural reorganization of your awareness, a shift in the whole field.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Think of someone who spent decades being the responsible one, always carrying the weight for everyone else. That was their dominant figure. The ground beneath it was probably full of resentment, exhaustion, maybe fear. They might not figure this out by thinking harder. Instead, maybe they just start practicing this, allowing attention. Sitting quietly, just noticing the chronic tension in their shoulders, that feeling of burden, without judging it or trying to fix it.
Just allowing it to be there.
Yes. And then one day, maybe sitting there, maybe doing dishes, the field just shifts instantly. They don't think it, they realize it deep down. Oh my God, I'm not holding all this weight out of noble duty. I'm holding it because somewhere deep down, I believe my worthiness, maybe even my right to exist or be loved, depends on me being this responsible anchor.
Wow. That changes everything about how you see that behavior.
Completely changes the structure of the perception.
Right.
The action being responsible isn't seen as a virtue anymore. It's seen as a survival strategy, rooted in a core belief held unconsciously in the ground.
And that shift, that's the kind of insight we're aiming for.
That's the potential, yes. We create the conditions for these kinds of field shifts by clearing the ground, by practicing this non-judgmental attention. Gestalt calls this attitude creative indifference.
Creative indifference. That sounds a bit cold.
It's not cold detachment at all. It's actually a very warm, spacious allowing of whatever arises. It's indifferent only in the sense that you're not prejudging what's allowed to show up. You're creatively open to the entire landscape. When you stop judging a figure, you stop nailing it to the past, and you allow the whole field to breathe and reorganize itself towards its natural state of wholeness and resolution. And all of this leads us to the really core revelation, I think, which is you don't become whole by fixing fragments. You realize you actually already were whole underneath the interference.
So wholeness isn't about getting rid of all the contradictions or messy bits.
No. Wholeness is the presence of unobstructed perception. It's the capacity of the field itself when we stop interfering with it.
So the goal isn't really to gather up all the pieces and glue them into one solid statue of me.
No. The goal is to stop doing the things that cause us to see them as broken pieces in the first place. The judging, the suppressing, the identifying with only one acceptable version.
The field just organizes itself if we get out of the way.
It organizes itself effortlessly. Think about someone struggling with, say, cycles of intense anger. Maybe they spent years trying to fix the angry part, suppress it, get rid of it.
And every time the anger came back, they felt like a failure, shattered again, back to the broken identity.
Exactly, stuck in that loop. Identifying with the calm, controlled figure they wanted to be, and constantly exiling the angry figure, which, of course...
That guarantees the angry figure keeps fighting for attention.
Precisely. The breakthrough might come when they finally stop trying to fix or name or judge any of it, when they just sit somehow and allow the entire spectrum to be present in their awareness. The rage, yes, but also the shame underneath it, maybe grief, maybe moments of competence, maybe joy, maybe fear, all of it.
Allowing it all to coexist in the field.
Yes, without labeling any single one of them as the real me. Realizing, perhaps, that they are the space that contains all of these experiences. And in that radical allowance, something amazing happens. The figures stop fighting each other for dominance.
They just exist as part of a whole ecosystem.
A living, dynamic ecosystem. And the person finds freedom not because they finally conquered the anger, but because they no longer need to be just one thing. They are the field itself.
That feels like the ultimate shift, realizing you are the space, not just the content moving through the space.
Exactly. And when you have that perspective, the figures themselves transform. They stop being enemies you have to manage or flaws you have to fix.
They become messengers.
Messengers, conveying vital information. The anxious self isn't a defect. It's a messenger alerting you to a possible need for safety or maybe unprocessed fear. The angry self isn't bad. It's often a protector trying to signal a boundary violation or an unmet need.
So they don't need to be gathered up and integrated into one thing. They need to be witnessed, held, listened to.
Witnessed, held, and allowed within the larger field of awareness.
Maybe we can use that lake analogy to kind of anchor this idea.
Yes, the lake is a good one. Think of the figures, your roles, your moods, the masks you wear. Sometimes they're like the ripples on the surface of the lake.
Always changing, moving, affected by the wind, the context, dynamic, necessary even.
Exactly. And the ground, your fundamental awareness, your presence, the essential field of your being, that's the depth. The whole volume of the lake itself.
So the goal isn't to control the surface, to force the lake to be perfectly still and reflective all the time.
No, never. That's impossible and exhausting. The goal is simply to remember the depth. To remember that you are the depth. You are whole, not because you managed to eliminate all the ripples, but because you are the vast, enduring depth that holds them all. You aren't a thing to be assembled. You're a continuous, living process to be witnessed. Hashtag, outro.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive into Gestalt has really offered a different way to think about ourselves. It feels like a profound shift both philosophically and practically. Integrity isn't about rigid consistency.
No, it's more the capacity to hold contradiction.
And being yourself isn't about picking one authentic version and sticking to it.
It's about letting all the versions, all the figures, dance. Letting them emerge and recede without forcing them into one costume. Realizing we are the space, not the ever-changing content.
Right.
And maybe that leads us to a final thought, something provocative for you to just sit with this week. What if you stopped trying so hard to gather yourself? Stop trying to force all the pieces to fit together because you started to suspect you were never actually scattered in the first place. What if you could stop the project of becoming whole and just start being the flowing field that you already are? The melody of you, with all its complex harmonies and occasional dissonances, was always playing. Maybe we just needed to stop trying to conduct it.
And just start listening.
And just start really deeply listening.